Hey Claire.
Hey Zoe.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. It's been a while. You've had a little break from podcasting. You're a busy lady.
Yeah, it's great to be back, but it was also great to have a break. As I mentioned, busy lifestyle, two young kids, lots of obligations. So it's important to keep a balance.
Yeah. And Quillette's just been crazy lately. Like, we've got 2 social events, one in Melbourne at the end of this month, one in London, which is set to be the biggest we've ever done. And we've been publishing so many great articles. One of those, probably my favourite one from last week, was the one by Heather McDonald.
Yeah, about the Spanish kissing episode.
Kiss, yes, with Rubiales, who we're both a bit of a fan of, actually, to be honest. He's not a bad-looking guy. But, yeah, what's your take on that?
Well, for anyone who doesn't know, Luis Rubiales spontaneously kissed a member of the Spanish football team, the women's football team, after they had won the World Cup here in Sydney. And it's kind of a shame because the whole kissing fiasco has overshadowed the fact that the Spanish team won, which is disappointing. But I mean, I haven't had much of a take because I ignored the controversy. It seemed like a controversy over nothing to me, really. But Heather McDonald wrote a piece for us, and I thought it was spot on. I thought her argument was quite sharp. Her argument was simply that if we are going to make the argument that women should and can occupy every single sphere that men do, such as, special forces in the military, we simultaneously cannot encourage or facilitate or even celebrate having a breakdown or a crisis after minor transgressions, like being pecked on the lips during a World Cup victory. And, I mean, Heather makes the point that context is just everything. And you and I certainly do not advocate for random men to just go around kissing women on the lips.
Of course not.
In any scenario, but winning the World Cup is not an everyday scenario, is it?
No. And as Heather says, it was a moment of spontaneous joy.
Yeah.
We see it all the time in sports. We see men kissing each other. Is that assault when 2 men kiss each other? We see people overcome by joy, kissing the ball, kissing the trophy, kissing the ground. People do crazy things.
Is it assault if you spray champagne on someone else? I mean, in an everyday situation, if you're walking down the street and someone sprays champagne on you, that's assault.
Yeah.
In a sporting scenario, maybe not. And people will argue, well, consent is everything. And of course consent is everything. But you would think that in joyful celebratory moments like that, you are consenting. I would consent to someone kissing me on the lips. I mean, maybe I'm just being a chauvinist. I don't know.
Female chauvinist.
I think it's blown way out of proportion. And, people have really tried to destroy his dignity over what I consider to be a fairly minor transgression.
They're calling him a misogynist, which I find ridiculous, and I really dislike this flippant use of the word misogyny. It's a very powerful word, and if people actually cared about misogyny, they would use it carefully because it's a real thing. Misogynists do exist, and Luis Rubiales is not a misogynist. He obviously loves women. We have no evidence to support this claim that he's a misogynist.
You would think that someone who has helped a team win the World Cup, the women's team would not be misogynist. Yeah.
Definitely not. And he obviously, has a lot of respect for these amazing athletes. It's all blown out of control. And, I think people do know that context matters. So why are they looking at it so unfavorably? Why do they want to create this narrative? And I don't know. It's perhaps they find male sexuality so intimidating, so problematic.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the act was sexual, but it could be perceived that way. And it certainly has been perceived that way by many of the people who are being outraged by it. And, I'm a big supporter of many aspects and strands of 20th century feminism, but one strand or theme that I'm not a terribly big supporter of is the demonization of male sexuality. And it is a real thing. And it is, potentially the backlash against Rubiales comes from a resentment or a contempt or just a bitterness towards the kind of man that he represents, which is this very male,
high
testosterone, quite attractive, athletic man. And I don't have a problem with a man like that, but some people
full
do.
Support of men like that.
And there is some people just don't like male sexuality. Just like misogynists, like real misogynists do not like female sexuality and have a big problem with it. There's hatred of male sexuality and hatred of female sexuality, and both sides need to come to grips with life, basically.
And as Heather says, and many people have said, obviously there's a cultural thing there too. I lived in Spain for 4 years, dated a few Spanish men. They're more comfortable with showing their emotion, and they are, they're warm, extroverted in general people. And Jenny, it doesn't look like she felt like she was a victim
at the time.
At first, there's some recordings of her straight after, and they were all, like having a great time, joking about it. And then she was told she was a victim.
It's interesting how we can experience events and not perceive them as traumatic at the time, but then people want to ascribe trauma to us. It's not uncommon for women who are the victims of certain experiences. Like it happens in discussions around sexual assault. So obviously sexual assault is in general an atrocity and is often traumatic, can be one of the most traumatic experiences that people go through. But not everyone who goes through it does end up traumatized or does develop PTSD. And we had an article where Peggy Sartre shared her experience of being in a support group and saying that she didn't actually live with trauma. And some of the activists in the group sort of bullied her into expressing feelings of trauma. And that was a real eye-opener for me to see how trauma can be a currency in some contexts. We're all different and we can react to events differently. Some of us will develop PTSD after experiencing some horrific things. Some of us won't. And it's hard. We don't really know what makes some people more prone to PTSD more than others. But it's interesting how the people who don't suffer from long-term consequences are sort of resented or not believed. I can tell. I've been to a couple of psychologists, and one in particular that I remember was a psychoanalyst. And when you go and see a psychoanalyst, they get you to talk about your life from the start, like all your memories. And she wanted to give me my life history, and I was lying on the couch and I gave her my life history, and at the end of it she was like, you need to come and see me every day for at least a year. And I was like, that's not happening. But the reason was that I had gone through these experiences which in her mind were all horrific and traumatic, but they were not traumatic for me and are not traumatic for me now. And so it was that experience was interesting, and I think that our culture has at the moment a bit of a fetish for trauma. We want to see trauma. We want people to express feelings of being traumatized.
And certain leaders of movements, for example, like feminist movements or politicians, can use an event and use a person like Jenny Hermoso as a puppet, essentially, as further evidence of their claim. Even if Jenny didn't feel like a victim, they'll say, oh, well, actually, Jenny, you are a victim, so you should feel bad about this, And it's interesting how it tends to happen more with women. Like, I've never seen two men talking and one man saying, oh, are you sure you don't feel bad about that? That sounds pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like, he shouldn't have done that to you. Whereas it happens with women all the time, You can be telling your girlfriend, oh, I had this experience with a guy. It was a bit awkward, but, and
you've been raped.
Yeah, you've been assaulted. And I wonder if it's that, like, female conformity. What's that in evolutionary psychology? It's like this idea that women tend to want
consensus. Or social consensus.
Maybe.
Probably. But I think there are some, like, I know that I've had discussions where I'm like, are you sure you're not traumatized by that?
Yeah.
Because some people do put themselves at risk, and some people do go through phases where their behavior is potentially self-destructive. And when people have post-traumatic stress disorder, they can often be quite numb and put themselves into more traumatic situations. So a person who has been traumatized by child abuse or whatever, domestic violence, can end up going down a path where they start drinking a lot, taking a lot of drugs, and then putting themselves in dangerous positions where they end up getting traumatized further. And they often lack insight when that is happening. I don't think when a friend is expressing concern, it's always a case of not being sincere, because we all need friends who sort of care for us if our behaviour is we're doing things that are self-destructive. But at the same time, it's just a fact that we don't all experience trauma necessarily when something bad happens, and that's okay. Actually, that's a good thing if we can bounce back and not feel traumatized.
Yeah, and the way we frame things is so important. Like, I remember, so when I was younger, I was still in high school, I met this older guy, and he was definitely way too old to be talking to me. He was still like a young adult, but the age gap was too big, right? He was a bit of a creep, for sure. But look, I enjoyed his company. I was young. I was exploring things. It was consensual. Fine. We were friends. We had a falling out and didn't talk to each other for a while. And then he came out of the woodwork, I think around the Me Too era. He obviously was freaking out. He knew that, like, our relationship had sort of soured, and I guess he felt like I might come after him or something. So he preemptively sent me this long apology, and it said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have taken advantage of this, like, power dynamic. I was older than you. It wasn't right, blah, blah, blah. And that was the first time that I actually saw myself as a victim. It did make me see the experience in a different light. And I did feel sorry for myself. And I did feel sorry for a little while, but, it doesn't affect me to today. Today. But just that reframing completely, changed my opinion of him and the situation. So
and I think it's totally valid to resist that framing. I mean, if your life is going well and you have a healthy lifestyle and you're not doing drugs and, you've got a job and a healthy relationship, resist feeling like a victim. Why should you? Even if something bad happened in the past, you don't have nightmares about it. Like, I presume you don't. So, like, who cares? Whatever. It's in the past. You learn from your mistakes. It's when, I think it's more, when people are really suffering and they are having nightmares, or their life is, not progressing the way they would like it to. That's probably when they need to go to a therapist and sort things out. But you're right. This making someone feel like a victim is one of the worst things you can do to a person. And that's what Jacinta Price said in her speech yesterday at the National Press Club, which I know you watched.
Yep. So context for people outside of Australia, On the 14th of October, Australia will hold a referendum and will be asked to vote as to whether we want to include an Indigenous voice to Parliament.
Yes.
Jacinta Price is an Indigenous woman.
Yep.
She's on the no side.
Yep.
And yeah, I watched her speech. Absolutely incredible, very moving. The questions at the end were really good, the way she handled those two. Pretty much, yeah, her whole, like the crux of her argument is that Indigenous Australians are not victims just because of their Aboriginality.
Yes.
They are victims in the sense that, the further away from a city they live, the worse outcomes they have. And as she says, the closer they live to the traditional lifestyle, which is what her mother grew up in. I think you were reading that her mother, Bess.
Yeah, Bess Price is a famous advocate, Aboriginal elder in the Northern Territory, and she grew up in Humpies until she was 9 years old and had her first child at age 13 and escaped from a domestic violence situation by the time she was 19. And then she met Jacinta Price's father, who is white. So Jacinta comes from a mixed race family and her own husband is Scottish. So she feels very deeply about not dividing, not pitting one race against the other because her family and her background has mixture. And I think it's a very authentic position to take, and that's how her speech could be described. She spoke from a position of authenticity that I have not seen an Australian politician speak from in a long time. So she grew up in the Northern Territory. She's now a senator and she's the shadow minister for Indigenous Affairs. But she knows what she's talking about. She's experienced domestic violence herself. One of her aunties went missing, disappeared after being forced to marry a convicted murderer. So she knows what she's talking about, and she's been a long-term advocate of women's safety, saving women from domestic violence in Aboriginal communities and children from abuse. And it was interesting how she opened her speech because she said that she's been discouraged, or she was discouraged by another high-profile Indigenous woman called Marsha Langton for drawing any thread or any connection between traditional Aboriginal culture and current levels of violence. But Jacinta says, look, they believe in sorcery. Yeah. So if someone is sick or someone dies, payback needs to be sought. Yeah. So that means committing violence against someone else. Any person who reads about hunter-gatherer lifestyles knows that there's a much higher level of violence in hunter-gatherer lifestyles than in modern democratic societies. Yeah. I mean, that's been shown by scholars such as Stephen Pinker, Napoleon Chagnon. It's not a secret, but there's this romanticisation of Aboriginal culture by a lot of people in Australia. Yeah. There's this idea that before white people came, everyone was just
idyllic,
holding hands, singing Kumbaya. It's not what it was like. There's archaeological evidence that shows that a very high number of women had skull fractures, and there's evidence of ritual torture. So I mean, I think it's important to preserve Aboriginal culture, take the good things, the art, which is what Bess Price has done. She's a huge champion of Aboriginal art. Take the good things, leave the violence behind. And that's what Bess and Jacinta have been advocates of. And I find it very, I don't know what the right word is, upsetting or offensive when I see on Twitter, for example, there are white urban lefties saying that Jacinta has no right to talk about these issues. And it's like, and you have more right than her?
Yeah. So I finished Jacinta's speech and then I thought, no, I'm going to be fair. I'm going to back it up with Marsha's speech. And look, before I say anything, I think it's incredible that we have two, strong, intelligent Aboriginal Australian women leading both these movements.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with one or the other, isn't it great that, both
They're
of them
at
are
the
there?
forefront.
Yeah. But Marsha's speech, it's just so depressing and down, and there's no energy that, if you vote yes, this is going to be this is my image of the future. It's just all about the past. It's all about suffering and pain, and there's no energy to it. And you sent me a video that I listened to of, I think it's Marsha's speech from 2017. So it is a while ago, but she echoed similar thoughts in her speech recently. And she says in this speech, "Of course Australia is racist. It's a horrible racist country." And I'm just like, wow, okay. Whenever I hear someone say white Australia is racist, I'm like, firstly, all humans are racist, really. Like, all humans are capable of racism. It doesn't matter what race. There are some, evolutionary reasons that people fear or are skeptical of other groups of people. And when you live in an incredible progressive country like Australia, where we've got democracy and, most people live really, really well, those racial divides naturally dissipate, especially in, prosperous cities like Sydney. So I really don't think that's a fair description of Australia to say it's a horrible racist country.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed finding a country that is as racially diverse as Australia, that has that is as harmonious and has as high, like, we have extremely high levels of social trust. And I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find levels of social trust that we have, and you'd probably find it in the Scandinavian countries, but we're probably more racially diverse than Scandinavian countries. We have very high Chinese diaspora. We've got lots of Indians living here. And something like a quarter of the population were either not born here or their parents were not born here. That's really, we're a success story in terms of migration.
Yeah.
And look, the mainstream narrative around Aboriginal disadvantage is that it's caused by colonisation and intergenerational trauma and white supremacy, or the remnants of white supremacy and systemic racism. That's the mainstream narrative. And Jacinta Price's speech was a breath of fresh air because she completely punctured that narrative. She was asked, does colonisation still affect Aboriginal people today? And she flat out said, no, I don't think it does. And she said, if it does, it's in a positive way because we have running water and readily available food.
Yeah.
And then she was asked about intergenerational trauma. And I think it's a complex issue, right? It's complicated. But she made a good point, which is that on another side of her family, her ancestors were dispossessed of their country and came out to Australia in chains as convicts. Yeah. And if intergenerational trauma is real, then she would have double intergenerational trauma.
Pretty spicy response. It was amazing. It got a round of applause. Great response. I don't fully agree that, there aren't ongoing ramifications now.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago, colonisation. Australia's such a new country and, but, if that's her opinion, I'll take it from her. But it's true that, if you look through our family history, God, some of the stuff that our ancestors have been through too.
Every single person who is alive today has ancestors who were brutalised, raped and murdered. All of us come from people who committed acts of violence or who were the victims of acts of violence. That's just a fact. If anybody who understands history, has read enough history, knows that we live in an incredible era of peacefulness and non-violence, but humanity has not always been like this. And we all come from people who used to live in tribes, and they didn't have the same attitudes towards violence as we have today.
To play devil's advocate, though, if you let me.
Yes.
Some people listening to this would say, okay, come on, though, like, you are not reminded every day. You don't have to see the people that abused your ancestors every day. You're not reminded of it. You don't have to live around these people. What would you say?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think if you develop a fixation on a perceived enemy, it's going to become psychologically toxic over time. So in my case, my family working class, and I could look at very rich people who have inherited wealth over generations, like lots of land, and feel resentful. And I could focus on aristocrats or oligarchs or who are people of very high net worth and say, you motherfuckers, you exploited my ancestors who had to, who were serfs or peasants who had to work on the feudal. I mean, I could do that. And you don't have to go back that far to see disadvantage, economic disadvantage in my family. And then similarly, as a female, I could look at men and say, you bastards, you're rapists, you raped my female ancestors. But I don't think that's a healthy way to go through life. It's not conducive to flourishing on a personal level. Maybe it's just my privilege talking, but I think it's better to focus on what you can control in your own life and improve yourself. And just like life is not easy, and we have to do what we can to improve our situation every single day. And we do that by focusing on what we can control, by having strong relationships, having friends, having family, and just creating a life that we can control, and focusing on past crimes that happened before we were even born, to people who aren't even alive today. To focus on crimes that people committed 200 years ago is a waste of mental energy. It really is. And I don't think it's a healthy way to go through life.
And from what you've just said, I can see that for you it's a individual thing, that you as an individual take on the responsibility to make your life better and see the world in a more positive light. But on the other side, there are people who just discount the individual completely and want to see everything as group, everything as identity, racial identity, even if some of these people who might have some similar racial roots have had completely different experiences. This has been one of the main topics in this voice discussion. Like, there are people who might have some Indigenous background, but they've lived in the city. They've had like even more like privileged experience than me or like you or anyone. And then talking about people who have lived, in really remote communities.
Extreme disadvantage.
Yeah, like they're similar just because they have, a
shred of shared DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, people are going to hate us for saying this, but I'm half Greek. I didn't grow up in much Greek culture. I went to Greece and was like, holy shit, I'm not Greek at all. Like, I'm Australian, and we're all Australian. We're made up of many, many different cultures, and it's good to have these discussions about how we can all live harmoniously with such different cultures. But
there's a good article that we published a couple of years ago by Razib Khan about identity politics. It's called "Not All Identities Are Equal," something like that.
Okay.
And he makes the argument, and it's a very compelling argument, that race is probably the last identity that you want to emphasize because it's the most dangerous. Focusing on class identity is not as dangerous because class is not fixed.
Exactly.
A person can be born into poverty and become wealthy, and so they can change. A person can change their economic status. It's not fixed in perpetuity. Gender, again, is not as dangerous because even though, you know, some of us can be misogynist and some of us can be misandrous, ultimately men and women spend a lot of time together and procreate. You know, we need each other for procreation. And so a lot of the animosity between men and women is just smoothed over in the domestic sphere because
It has to be.
yeah, we enter into romantic relationships with one another. Race, on the other hand, is dangerous to amplify. To amplify racial identity is dangerous because you can get to a point where one racial group does eliminate another, and that has happened in history.
Story as old as time.
So it is a dangerous form of identity to emphasize and get people paying attention to it. And the risk is the backfire effect. So when you get racial minorities becoming very aggressive and drawing people's attentions to matters to do with race or attacking the majority identity, which might be, you know, the white identity. If white people feel they're being attacked, that can have a backfire effect of sort of igniting white identity politics, which is what we don't want.
Yeah, very ugly.
We don't want people to think about their race. We want to go back to the ideal of the colourblind society.
Yeah.
The ideal that Martin Luther King worked so hard for, and which, you know, perhaps we have had a colourblind society. It's just, and it's trendy now to move away from that because of these theories of systemic oppression and colonisation. And, you know, we just have to resist it.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this lately because, as you saw on Twitter, I think you retweeted, if you can still say that, a screenshot of my I took a screenshot of the ticketing process at the Sydney Fringe Festival, which is on at the moment. So I'm booking tickets to see my mate Melody Rachel, who's performing. And I thought I saw something interesting. I saw that, you know, there's normal price tickets and then there's deadly ticks. So for people who aren't in Australia, deadly is a colloquial term that's used by Indigenous Australians, and it means like wicked or cool. Okay, so they have general admission price, $29, deadly ticks, $22. Thought, interesting. What evidence do they require? Like, do I have to upload like a certificate of Aboriginality that doesn't exist?
23andMe.
23andMe, you know, nothing. So people can just buy these tickets, but it just made me think like, firstly, what difference does it really make that, you know, I would prefer, you know, part of my money to actually go towards like a cause that's helping people in remote communities or something like that. It doesn't do anything. Like, it just makes people see a divide and it makes people who aren't Aboriginal think, you know, what's up with this? Why are we being separated like this? Why is one group? And yet again, it's an immutable characteristic. You cannot change your race.
Yeah.
It's not like a class thing.
One thing that I find quite nauseating, and I don't know why it is such a dominant cultural phenomenon, is white guilt.
Oh, yes.
And I just find it's difficult for me to wrap my head around it because I don't experience it. I think part of it is class, like it's the conflation of class with race. So I think perhaps one reason why I don't experience it is because I didn't grow up in a privileged environment. And I know that true privilege in life is is economic and it's related to class.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very powerful force, and you see it in Australia and you see it in Canada and you see it in the US. And I don't know why it's not interrogated more, because it's actually very patronizing and infantilizing. This idea that, the white people have to give cheap tickets to the Aboriginal people who don't have, presumably don't have enough money to go and see the ballet. I mean, do people not see how fucking patronizing that is? It's like, just treat people as people.
Yeah.
Have some respect for people's own capabilities and agencies. And when did we lose sight of the fact that people make their own choices in life? And sometimes people live outside of the mainstream because that's their choice. We don't have to feel sorry for everybody all the time, going around pitying people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's their choice.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to live outside of the mainstream. Maybe we need to respect people's agency.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, like I'm all for concessions. Like if you're on a low income card, I used to have one of those, student card, like pensioner card, of which everyone of all race can apply for and get. Have those tickets. Like, don't just assume that Aboriginal people are poor and therefore they need, like, it's so, ridiculous.
It's nauseating.
Anything more to
get off your chest?
This is a safe space to talk about anything.
Well, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see Jacinta Price's profile rise. I think she's a breath of fresh air, and I think she's a real leader. And if there's one good thing about this referendum, it's that it's raising her profile.
Yep.
And there are so many people now saying Jacinta for PM. She offers an optimistic vision for the country. She really does.
She could be PM.
She offers an extremely optimistic vision. I mean, she's pragmatic. She looks forward.
She's young.
She's female. She's charismatic. So I'm just really excited to watch where she goes.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be cool if she became Prime Minister one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note.
Yes. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
All right. Bye.